young man standing in front of the camera, thick stacks of $100 bills cascading through his fingers like confetti. The money hits the ground as crowds scramble to grab the cash, their screams of excitement echoing through the Chicago streets. This wasn't a music video or a publicity stunt. This was Carmaine Wilson, popularly known as Young QC, throwing away tens of thousands of dollars just days after his mother's funeral. The 23-year-old aspiring rapper had suddenly transformed from a broke, unemployed dreamer into someone flashing luxury cars, designer clothes, and expensive jewelry across every social media platform. His YouTube videos showed him withdrawing massive amounts from bank accounts, living like he just signed $1 million record deal. The community watched in fascination as Young QC's lifestyle exploded overnight. But what viewers didn't know was the horrifying truth behind that money. Every dollar he threw to those crowds was stained with the blood of the one person who had loved him unconditionally. Every designer purchase was bought with funds stolen from a woman who had sacrificed everything for her only child. The luxury car he was customizing, it belonged to his victim. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell as we go deeper into the stories that will make you question how far someone will go for money and fame. We expose the darkest corners of human nature that most people never want to believe exist. Because what Carmaine Wilson did to get that money would leave even hardened detectives speechless. And what happened to him afterward in prison? Let's just say that karma has a way of catching up with those who commit the ultimate betrayal. This isn't just another true crime story about greed or family dysfunction. This is about a son who looked his mother in the eyes, knowing he had already signed her death warrant. This is about a community that watched in horror as someone celebrated the murder of the woman who had given him life. And this is about how the justice system and fellow inmates deal with men who crossed the most sacred line imaginable. The money ran out. The fame never came. But the consequences? Those last forever. Welcome to one of the most disturbing cases of matricide in Chicago's bloody history, where social media became the window into a killer's soul, and where prison walls couldn't protect a man from the weight of his own evil. This story takes us to Chicago, Illinois, specifically the uptown neighborhood on the city's north side. Chicago, America's third largest city, has always been a place of stark contrasts. Known for its stunning architecture, deep dish pizza, and rich cultural heritage, the Windy City also carries a much darker reputation that overshadows its beauty. Uptown itself is a neighborhood that perfectly embodies Chicago's contradictions. Historically diverse and culturally vibrant, it's home to everything from historic theaters to bustling immigrant communities. Tree-lined streets mix with affordable housing projects, creating a patchwork of prosperity and struggle that defines much of urban America. But in 2012, when our story unfolds, Chicago was making headlines for all the wrong reasons. The city was drowning in violence, with murder rates climbing to levels that shocked the nation. By year's end, over 500 people will be killed in Chicago, a number that made international news and earned the city the grim nickname Chirac. The violence wasn't confined to any single neighborhood. From the south side to the north side, from wealthy areas to impoverished blocks, bullets were flying and families were grieving. Gang warfare, drug disputes, and random acts of violence had turned Chicago into a war zone where even children weren't safe walking to school. In Uptown, residents had grown accustomed to hearing sirens and seeing police tape. They'd learned to keep their heads down and their doors locked. But even in a community that had witnessed its share of tragedy, what happened to Yolanda Holmes would leave neighbors stunned and heartbroken. This wasn't gang violence or a drug deal gone wrong. This wasn't a robbery or a case of mistaken identity. This was something far more personal and infinitely more disturbing, a crime that would shake the very foundation of what people believed about family bonds and maternal love. What's the crime rate like in your city? Are you dealing with the same kind of violence that plagued Chicago in 2012? Let us know in the comments below. We will read every single one. At the heart of this tragedy are two people whose lives were forever intertwined by blood, love, and ultimately betrayal. Yolanda Holmes was everything you'd want in a neighbor, a friend, and a mother. At 50 years old, she had built a life centered around service to others and devotion to her only child. Her hair salon, Nappy Heads, wasn't just a business. It was a community hub in Uptown where women came not only to get their hair done, but to share their stories, their struggles, and their dreams. Yolanda's generosity extended far beyond her salon chairs. Every year, she organized back-to-school parties for neighborhood children, personally buying supplies and making sure kids had what they needed to start the school year right. She understood poverty because she had lived it, and she never forgot what it felt like to go without. Her kindness wasn't performative or calculated. It came from a genuine desire to lift up those around her. But Yolanda's greatest love, her most passionate devotion, was reserved for her son Carmaine. Born in 1990, he was her world, her pride, her everything. She had raised him largely alone after his father, Jeffrey Todd Wilson, was imprisoned in 1993 for murder and arson. Jeffrey wasn't just absent. He was a notorious figure in Chicago's underworld, a man whose violent crimes had made headlines and left scars on everyone who knew him. Yolanda was determined that her son would be different. She worked tirelessly to provide for him, to shield him from the streets that had claimed his father, and to give him every opportunity she never had. When Carmaine showed interest in music, she supported his dreams of becoming a rapper. When he struggled to find work, she helped him financially. When he needed a car, she bought him a Mustang. But Carmaine Wilson, who performed under the name Young QC, was not the son his mother believed him to be. By 2012, at 22 years old, he was a man consumed by frustration and envy. His rap career had stalled before it ever really began. He was unemployed, living off his mother's generosity, and watching other young men his age achieve the success that seemed to elude him. The relationship between mother and son had grown toxic, though Yolanda may never have fully realized it. Where she saw love and support, Carmaine saw control and dependence. Where she saw a young man who needed guidance, he saw himself as entitled to more than what life had given him. His father's criminal legacy seemed to whisper in his ear, suggesting that taking what you want is easier than earning it. Around the time of Carmaine's 23rd birthday, something dark shifted in his mind. The failed rap career, the mounting bills, the constant dependence on his mother. It all became too much to bear. But instead of finding legitimate work or accepting help, Carmaine Wilson made a decision that would destroy everything his mother had worked to build. He began plotting her murder. The plan wasn't born from sudden rage or a moment of madness. This was cold, methodical, and driven by pure greed that no one could imagine. Carmaine knew about his mother's life insurance policy. He knew about the assets from her successful salon business. He knew about her bank accounts and her property, and he wanted it all without wasting time. But Carmaine didn't have the stomach to kill his own mother himself. It was one of the hardest things he could do. So he went shopping for a hitman, eventually finding Eugene Spencer, a man willing to commit murder for the right price. The negotiation was brief and brutal. For $1,200 to end Yolanda Holmes' life. For $1,200 to kill his biological mother. The planning phase revealed just how deeply Carmaine's mind had turned against the woman who had given him everything. He didn't just hire Spencer. He became the architect of his mother's death. He provided Spencer with a gun, ensuring the weapon would be available for the killing. He gave him specific clothes to wear, designed to help him blend in with other residents of his mother's building. Most chillingly, Carmaine gave Spencer a bottle of detergent to carry, a prop that would make him look like just another tenant doing laundry. He provided the access code to his mother's apartment building, eliminating any barriers that might prevent Spencer from reaching his target. But perhaps the most heartbreaking detail of all was Carmaine's plan to ensure his mother would open her door. He would call her beforehand, telling her he was coming over to visit. Yolanda, always happy to see her son, would be expecting him when the knock came. She would open that door with love in her heart, never knowing that her own child had sent death to her doorstep. Loriana Johnson, Carmaine's girlfriend, agreed to serve as the getaway driver. The woman who should have been a voice of reason, who should have stopped this madness, instead became an accomplice to this horrifying matricide. Have you ever suspected someone close to you of something terrible? Have you ever felt that chill when you realize someone you trusted might be capable of unthinkable acts? Share your thoughts below, because sometimes the people we love most are hiding the darkest secrets. September 2012. The night that would forever change the uptown community and expose the depths of human evil that can exist within a family. Yolanda Holmes was at home in her apartment, likely winding down from another long day at the salon. She had no idea that miles away, her only son was putting the final pieces of her murder into motion. Eugene Spencer was armed and ready, Lorianna Johnson was behind the wheel of the getaway car, and Carmaine Wilson was about to make the phone call that would seal his mother's fate. The call came just as planned. Carmaine's voice on the other end, telling his mother he was coming over to see her. Yolanda, always delighted to spend time with her son, welcomed the news. She had no reason to suspect anything. This was her child, the boy she had raised and loved and sacrificed for. When he said he was coming over, she believed him. But Carmaine wasn't coming over. Eugene Spencer was. Spencer made his way to Yolanda's building, carrying the detergent bottle that would help him blend in, wearing the clothes Carmaine had provided, armed with a gun that would end a mother's life. The access code worked perfectly. The building security meant nothing when the killer had been given the keys by the victim's own son. When the knock came at Yolanda's door, she opened it expecting to see Carmaine's face. Instead, she found herself staring at a stranger with murder in his eyes. What happened next was beyond brutal. Spencer didn't just kill Yolanda Holmes. He executed her with a level of violence that spoke to the cold-blooded nature of the crime. She was shot while she slept, but that wasn't enough. Spencer then stabbed her, ensuring that there would be no chance of survival. And throughout this horrific attack, Carmaine Wilson was on the phone with Spencer, not as a concerned son, but as a mastermind making sure his plan was carried out completely. His voice came to the phone with chilling instructions. Make sure she's dead. Those words, spoken by a son about his own mother, represent a level of evil that defies comprehension. Yolanda Holmes died not just at the hands of a hired killer, but under the direct supervision of the child she had loved more than life itself. The ink was barely dry on Yolanda Holmes' death certificate when her son began his grotesque celebration. Within days of his mother's murder, Carmaine Wilson walked into banks across Chicago and systematically drained approximately $70,000 from her accounts. Money that Yolanda had earned through years of hard work at her salon, money she had saved for her future and her son's security, was now being stolen by the very person who had arranged her death. But Carmaine didn't just take the money. He flaunted it in the most public and disturbing way possible. He grabbed his phone, hit record, and began documenting his newfound wealth for the world to see. The YouTube videos that followed would become some of the most damning evidence against him, but in his twisted mind, they were his moment of triumph. Video after video showed young QC standing on Chicago street corners, thick stacks of $100 bills in his hands, throwing the cash in the crowds of people who scrambled to grab the money. The scenes were chaotic and surreal. Dozens of people diving for bills, while Carmaine stood in the center like some perverted version of a rap video, grinning as his mother's life, savings scattered across the pavement. The spending spree didn't stop with the cash giveaways. Carmaine took the Mustang that Yolanda had bought for him and immediately began customizing it with expensive modifications. New rims, custom paint, high-end sound systems. He transformed his mother's gift into a rolling monument to his greed. Every upgrade was paid for with her blood money. His social media accounts exploded with content showcasing his sudden wealth. Designer clothes, expensive jewelry, luxury items that would have been impossible on his previous income, all of it displayed with the arrogance of someone who believed he had gotten away with the perfect crime. He even bought puppies, using them as props in his videos to project an image of success and happiness. But the community that had loved Yolanda Holmes was watching, and they were horrified. Neighbors who had known both mother and son began connecting the dots. How does an unemployed aspiring rapper suddenly have tens of thousands of dollars to throw around just days after his mother's funeral? The timing was too convenient, the behavior too callous, the transformation too dramatic. Whispers turned to conversations, conversations turned to phone calls, and phone calls turned to tips to law enforcement. People who had watched Yolanda organize back-to-school events and provide for neighborhood children were now watching her son desecrate her memory with every dollar he spent. The investigation that would eventually bring Carmaine Wilson to justice began not in a police station or forensics lab, but in the hearts and minds of community that refused to let Yolanda's murder go unanswered. Her neighbors, her clients, her friends. They all knew something was terribly wrong with the picture young QC was painting on social media. The very videos he thought would establish his success as a rapper would instead become the evidence that would send him to prison for the rest of his life. The investigation into Yolanda Holmes' murder moved swiftly once authorities began connecting the dots between her death and her son's sudden wealth. The evidence was overwhelming. The social media posts, the bank withdrawals, the witness testimonies from community members who had watched Carl-Main's disturbing transformation. Eugene Spencer, the hitman, was arrested and eventually cooperated with authorities, revealing the full scope of Carl-Main's involvement in his mother's murder. Lorianna Johnson, the getaway driver, also faced charges for her role in the crime. The web of conspiracy that Carl-Main had woven began to unravel as each participant pointed fingers at the others. But justice moved slowly. It would take years for the case to wind its way through Chicago's overburdened court system. During this time, Carl-Main sat in jail awaiting trial, his dreams of rap stardom replaced by the harsh reality of life behind bars. In January 2020, nearly 8 years after his mother's murder, Carl-Main Wilson finally faced the consequences of his actions. The judge sentenced him to 99 years in prison, ensuring that he would spend the rest of his life paying for his crime. Eugene Spencer received 100 years, while Lorianna Johnson also received a significant sentence for her role as an accomplice. But the formal justice system was only part of Carl-Main's punishment. Prison has its own code of ethics, and inmates who harm family members, especially mothers, occupy the lowest rung of the prison hierarchy. The same man who had once thrown money to crowds on Chicago streets now found himself at the mercy of fellow inmates who viewed his crime as the ultimate betrayal. Prison walls couldn't protect Carl-Main from the reputation that followed him. Word travels fast in correctional facilities, and everyone knew what he had done. The respect he had craved as a rapper, the fear he thought he might command as a killer. None of it materialized. Instead, he became a target, a man marked by his own actions and despised by criminals who still maintained some twisted sense of family loyalty. However, he was sexually abused within the prison walls. He never wished something like that could happen to him. The luxury cars were gone. The designer clothes were replaced with prison uniforms. The expensive jewelry had been confiscated as evidence. The puppies he had bought as props were long forgotten. Everything Carl-Main had gained from his mother's murder had evaporated, leaving him with nothing but decades of confinement and the knowledge that he had destroyed the one person who had truly loved him. The community that had watched his social media spectacle with disgust could finally find some measure of peace. Yolanda Holmes' memory would no longer be tainted by her son's public displays of wealth. Her legacy would be defined by her generosity, her kindness, and her devotion to helping others, not by the evil actions of the child she had raised. The story of Carl-Main Wilson and Yolanda Holmes forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about family, greed, and the dangerous intersection of social media with criminal behavior. This case isn't just about one man's descent into evil. It's a warning about the toxic forces that can corrupt even the most sacred relationships. Yolanda Holmes represents everything good about motherhood and community service. She worked hard, gave generously, and loved unconditionally. Yet her very success and devotion became the target of her son's greed. This tragedy reminds us that sometimes our greatest acts of love can be exploited by those who should cherish them most. Carl-Main's obsession with projecting wealth and success on social media reveals a deeper sickness in our culture. His need to document and broadcast his crimes shows how the pursuit of online fame can warp judgment and amplify evil impulses. The platforms meant to connect us became tools for him to celebrate matricide and mock his victim's memory. The community's response offers hope in this dark story. Neighbors who had benefited from Yolanda's kindness refused to stay silent when they witnessed her son's disturbing behavior. Their willingness to speak up and demand justice proves that evil actions don't go unnoticed when communities care enough to act. Perhaps most importantly, this case demonstrates that crime doesn't pay, literally. Every dollar Carl-Main stole, every luxury item he bought, every moment of false success he documented disappeared when justice arrived. The 99-year sentence ensures he'll spend his life paying for a few months of blood money. For those watching, the lesson is clear. Recognize the warning signs of toxic relationships with money and fame. When someone's behavior changes dramatically after tragedy, when grief is replaced by celebration, when loss becomes gain, these are red flags that demand attention. Yolanda Holmes deserved better than the son who betrayed her, but her legacy lives on in the community she served, in the children she helped, and in the salon where she built relationships that outlasted her life. Her story reminds us that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts or social media followers. It's measured in the lives we touch and the love we give. What do you think drives someone to such extremes? How do we protect ourselves and our communities from people who view family as nothing more than a source of profit? Subscribe to this channel for more shocking true crime stories, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. Stay safe.